Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing Ed Kemper. Edmund Kemper is an American serial killer who murdered 10 people. He murdered his paternal grandparents, numerous college-age women, as well as his own mother. In 1973, after murdering his mother, he turned himself into police, and he's now serving 8 consecutive life sentences. Before we get started with the analysis, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. What we're going to be analyzing today are interviews with Ed Kemper. What's somewhat unique about him is his degree of intelligence and intellect. You're going to notice that he is able to speak in very detailed terms, in very precise ways about things that he did, things that he thought, but you got to be very careful with him because I'm going to point out some ways that he may be very, very manipulative. All right, let's just jump right in.
People see.
A nice guy.
Did you like Kemper?
I like Kemper.
You were able to appear like an ordinary person, non-threatening to...
I lived as an
All right, he's talking about how he lived as an ordinary person. You're going to see a little smirk on the corner of his mouth because the idea that he's this manipulative and that he's this good brings him pleasure. Let's watch this, and then we're going to watch it again.
ordinary person most of my life, even though I was living a parallel and increasingly sick life.
So him acknowledging what he did was sick is going to confuse people because then they go, okay, if he can acknowledge that, if he turned himself in, then I should believe what he's saying because someone who would turn themselves in would have no reason to lie. But I really don't think that's the case. Let's go back. Watch this small smirk across his face as he's talking about being able to blend in as normal.
non-threatening to...
I lived as an ordinary person most of my life, even though I was living a parallel and increasingly sick life. One victim let me back in the car. I locked myself out. She opened the door for me. My gun was under the seat. What in the hell am I doing telling you that? Am I a masochist? Am I looking to be tormented further?
All right, now we're going to talk about the various emotions he's displaying in a second, but what I really want you to hear about this, he's telling you right now exactly who he is, and you've got to look at the rest of these interviews through this lens. He's telling you, I am a wolf in sheep's clothing. You should not believe me. People have been killed because they believe me. There was a victim in a car who let me in because I was believable. So as you watch this, the pull to believe him, the pull to trust him is going to be there. That doesn't mean that everything he says is a lie, but it also means that he is doing to you exactly what he does to other people, which is make them think he's a nice guy. And that's exactly, he knows how to do it. He's very good at doing that. Let's go back and watch this clip again. I'm going to show what emotions come out.
One victim let me back in the car. I locked myself out. She opened the door.
See the eyebrows raise. Now this is surprise. When we feel intense shock or surprise, when we think back on those moments, our eyebrows raise because we do a similar expression to what we do when we feel shock or surprise. So even he was surprised that somebody let him back in. Let's watch that again.
One victim let me back in the car. I locked myself out. She opened the door for me. My gun was under the seat. What in the hell am I doing telling you that? Am I a masochist? Am I looking to be tormented further?
And then there's anger that comes across his face right there, right in his brow. Now, the question is this a bit of a performance? Is this part of him drawing people in, saying, I'm telling you about the truth of how bad I am. Therefore, you should believe what I'm saying further. Why am I telling you this? Really, even saying that may be part of his manipulation. This is going to get a little bit confusing in this way because you want to be able to believe, like I said, what he's saying because it sounds like he's being candid. And I think that there are definite truths in what he says, but I think there are also manipulations that we're going to get to. So I just want you to keep that in mind. He is a confusing person to watch. I also want you to keep in mind the savagery of what he did. If you're not familiar with what he ultimately did to his victims, the crimes that he committed are about as heinous as you could possibly imagine. If you want to read up on that, that's up to you. I won't force everybody to listen to the kind of details about the things that he did, but truly, he is as heinous as any serial killer that has ever lived, and that's the truth.
I'm trying to show you just how awful this got, how commanding.
And you saw a very brief smile again. Now, this is a little bit harder to see, but watch his mouth here.
I'm trying to show you just how awful this got, how commanding. And outside, I looked troubled at times. Other times I looked moody, Other times, perfectly serene. Not very sane.
And here's the smile again. It's interesting. Whenever we start looking at these killers, they always have certain tells. It seems that for him, he probably feels an exuberance that's a little bit hard to hide. When he thinks about the idea that he pulled off being normal in front of other people, he finds this amusing. This is such a funny idea to him. Watch this part again.
Other times, perfectly serene. Not very sane. But again,
So when people smile, we want to mirror that. That's just how we work neurologically. So when you see somebody talking in this way, and they're talking about, well, I wasn't very sane, unconsciously we recognize, okay, well, he recognizes the problems he had, and he's smiling. So it makes us more comfortable with this. It makes us forget what a monster he really is for just a minute.
I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds, women, and had very strong and violently.
Now, something I want you to keep in mind, he has serious issues with feeling sexually repressed. So he has to find some reason why he would go after college co-eds, rather than it being because he's attracted to them, rather than it being his own internal challenges with this. He has to attribute it to his mother. Now, I want you to keep in mind, he has come back after the murder and basically said, she was the reason I did all this. It's all because of her. You got to keep in mind, psychopaths externalize all blame. I think that there were a lot of ways that she was very awful to him, but that doesn't mean that she is actually the reason he did this, even if that's how he wants to frame it. So he may be saying things here that sound plausible, but in all reality, it's far more likely that he went after these women. Maybe he found them because his mother worked at a college campus, but it was his own impulses and desires that drove him to this. It had very little to do with his mother, I imagine.
Co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds, women, and
see, after he said women, he smiled again. There's part of him that feels confused, conflicted, excited by all of this.
had a very strong and violently outspoken position on men.
And then he does feel genuine anger if you look at his brow when he thinks about his mother's position on men.
For much of my upbringing, my mother was a sick, angry, hungry, and very sad woman.
Now, all of those things may be true, but I still don't think that that's the ultimate core reason behind why he committed these killings.
I hated her, but I wanted to love my mother. They represented not what my mother was, but what she liked, what she coveted, what was important to her, and I was destroying it.
Why did you actually kill the girls?
My frustration, my inability to communicate socially, sexually. I wasn't impotent.
So right here, he is acknowledging probably much more of what is the reality behind why he committed these murders. Once again, he'll oftentimes tie it back to his mother, but it probably has a lot more to do with this right here, as well as an insatiable desire to hurt, a curiosity and confusion about humans. As I talk about many times with these serial killers, they don't see people as people. They see them as literal objects. Because the way that he treated humans, even after they had passed, there's no other way to describe what he did other than literally seeing people as just objects. They were not humans to him like they are to you and me.
Emotionally, I was impotent. I was scared to death. And I was in shock because of that. I couldn't believe that it was that way. And I'm walking back there bewildered. I gotta kill her. I can't let her go. She's gonna tell on me. Everybody's gonna get me. She sees the blood on my hands. What are you doing? She pulled back and she gasped. And I think, whoa, I don't want her to know what happened. I said, your friend got smart with me.
So now we're seeing something a little bit different. I talk in many videos also about how people lick their lips when they start feeling excited or when they start feeling nervous. I don't think that he's feeling nervous right now. I think going back here is exciting to him because he is talking about the things that he did. He's talking about times where he had intense control. Watch this right here.
I don't want her to know what happened. I said, your friend got smart with me. She'd been getting really smart with me a lot. But
now you're seeing him go right back. The way he's talking, I think that that's exactly how he said it. His brain is being transported exactly back to that moment. So you saw him briefly lick his lips before he jumped directly into dialogue that was probably verbatim exactly what was said at that time.
But I never hit her. I killed her, but I didn't hit her.
Now watch his brow and his mouth right here.
I don't want her to know what happened. I said, your friend got smart with me. She'd been getting really smart with me a lot.
See, your friend got smart with me, eyebrows raised, and this way it means emphasis. He wants her to look at him. He wants to feel important right here.
But I never hit her.
He says, I never hit her. He gets angry at the idea.
I killed her, but
And then he smiled when he said, I killed her.
I didn't hit her.
But then didn't hit her, and gets his brows look angry again. It's a very interesting mix of emotions going on here. But look at the half smile when he talks about that he killed her.
Got smart with me. She'd been getting really smart with me a lot, but I never hit her. I killed her, but I didn't hit her. I said, your friend got smart with me and I hit her. I think I broke her nose. You better come help. She's about to die. Why does she have to know that?
And once again, there's a faint smile. And I don't know if it's hard for you to see this, but there's a faint smile. So the idea that he's going back to these moments and that he acknowledges the heinousness of the crimes he committed and he keeps saying they're awful, I think he still feels joy and pleasure and feels excitement talking about and thinking about what it is that he's done.
Wasn't that swell a knife anyway? I went out and bought a pawn shop huge knife. And
all right. You saw the big swallow after that. He's talking about the knife that he used. He's talking about having a big knife and thinking about the things that he did with it. The unconscious mind is a powerful thing. So even if those specific images aren't coming to mind right now, he's having to swallow because it is, once again, exciting for him. Watch this part again, then we'll keep going.
huge knife. And I kept on just mindlessly attacking. I thought I was pretty slick. And when I tripped all over myself, that first 2 murders, the first 24 hours, there were 3 clear times I should have been busted, and I wasn't.
So when he talks about this, once again, him talking about the vulnerabilities he had, him talking about the times he could have been busted, all of this stuff, this once again makes people want to believe him more because he is allowing himself to seem vulnerable, to say, look, I screwed up. And that's something that he does to draw people in. Probably the same tactics he's used throughout his life to manipulate people. And it works. It works really well. Just like if you think back at the very beginning of this video, the other person they interviewed said, yeah, I like Ed Kemper. And so you got to keep in mind that he's so much more manipulative than you might pick up just watching him talk, because he is interesting in that sense. Some serial killers, people are immediately repulsed by. They don't even want to see them talk. When it's somebody like Ed Kemper, because the way that he is open about what he's done, the way that he talks about that it was bad, the fact that he turned himself in makes people want to believe him more.
Night to the campus, I was picking up some very lovely young women.
You hear the chuckle again. I was picking up some very lovely young women.
Yes, access day or night to the campus. I was picking up some very lovely young women.
The reason I keep pointing this out is that you have to keep in mind how much joy he gets from what he has done. Even if he isn't saying that, even if he's saying what I did was wrong, he can't help but feel excited by it.
You know what we were talking about as we're driving around?
And there's the smile again, if you didn't notice.
Some very lovely young women. You know what we were talking about as we're driving around? Almost as often as not. This guy that's going around doing this stuff. And the second they started talking that, they didn't realize it, but they were getting a free ride.
This is interesting because if you've been following the Rex Heuermann case, there is an escort who basically said that when she was with him, he was talking about this exact thing. Do you know about the escorts that are getting murdered and all of this stuff? So this in some ways very much reflects a current case going on. That being said, Rex Heuermann has not been found guilty. He very well may be innocent. He's just a suspect, or he's the prime suspect at this point. But it's interesting the potential parallels there. Let's watch that again, and we'll keep going.
You know what we were talking about as we're driving around? Almost as often as not. This guy that's going around doing this stuff. And the second they started talking that, they didn't realize it, but they were getting a free ride.
So how come they get in a car with somebody at that time?
She judged me not to be that guy.
I think we're really starting to see that he smiles whenever he thinks about the fact that he stayed hidden, that he would fool people. To him, that just seems endlessly amusing.
With somebody at that time.
She judged me not to be that guy. I didn't look like it. It was getting easier to do. I was getting better at it. I was getting less detectable. I started flaunting that invisibility, severing a human head, 2 of them, at night in front of my mother's residence with her.
And another parallel with the Huerman case is that it's been alleged potentially the victims were killed at his house. And the parallels don't stop there, aside from the fact they're also very large men. I did a video talking about this, but it's very interesting to hear this. It's also interesting to see how much exuberance he is showing through his smiles as he's talking about what he did.
Severing a human head.
I think it's hard to keep in mind the reality of what he did, because it's not that unusual that somebody could talk about something horrible happening, that they could potentially have a smile on their face, but he actually did these things. He probably has visual images as he's talking about this, and he can't help but feel joy and to smile when he thinks about it.
2 of them at night in front of my mother's residence with her at home, my neighbors at home upstairs, their picture window open, the curtains open.
Why did you keep the heads? Why did you cut them off, and why did you keep them?
Something out of my childhood.
So he's attributing to why he keeps the heads to something from childhood. Keep that in mind as he talks through this.
I could put it on an incident.
So he laughs as soon as he starts to think back on this incident, if you notice that.
My father chopping the heads off of our 2 pet chickens and my mother insisting that I eat them for dinner. You know?
Now, the interesting thing about the way he's laughing, this is a genuine laugh. This is not an uncomfortable, sort of shaky laugh. Like, he is amused by this. And when you think about when we talk about trauma, it's not impossible that people laugh when they talk about something traumatic, or that he tries to see the amusement in it. But I want you to keep in mind, this is truly an unusual response with what he's talking about.
We could say it was something that simple. I don't think it was.
So think about the context here. He's just being asked about why he collected heads, and he can't help but let out a laugh. Now, part of what he's doing is telling a story from his childhood that I guess he could say that is amusing to him, because he's talking about how cruel his mother was. But I really want you to keep in mind that sometimes when the really savage things get brought up, he does smile, he does laugh. This is someone who is just as deranged now as he was when he was free. Let's watch this interaction again.
I could put it on an incident. My father chopping the heads off of our 2 pet chickens and my mother insisting that I eat them for dinner. You know? The stairs with a camera bag that belonged to a young woman that had her severed head in it. Walking up to my apartment past a happy young couple coming.
As he's talking about walking past a happy young couple, I know I hate pointing out just smiles, but it's so important to who he is, because the more he thinks about getting something by people, the more he thinks about staying hidden, the more excitement and the more happiness it brings him. So you have to keep in mind, in the context of every interview and everything that he does, he is telling people exactly what he wants them to know, because it brings him great joy to fool and manipulate people. So you always have to keep that in mind when you are watching Ed Kemper talk.
Down the stairs, who nodded and smiled at me as they went by. Good evening. And they're going out on a date where I'd love to be going. And I'm aware of both of these realities, and the distance between those two is so...
And there you see, as he's talking about the different realities, that someone's going out on a date and he's not. You see the anger on his brow right now. He does feel angry about this. I think that's something he would probably acknowledge too, actually.
I walked up to her bed. She's laying there reading a paperback. As many thousands of nights before.
There's the lip licking again. We see this so much with serial killers when they start talking about the things that they did.
She's laying there reading a paperback. As many thousands of nights before. And she said, "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now."
Another thing Ed Kemper seems to do is that when he talks about things that happened, he does seem to, in a very real way, go back to those moments. When he's talking about what his mother said, I imagine, similar to what he said when he was getting ready to murder those college students, I think this is exactly what his mother probably sounded like. It seems like he does have a very good memory, and I think that he really is impersonating these people in a very real way.
And she said, "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." I looked at her, I said,
There's the smile again. Even with tears, he is still smiling. So the question is are these tears real? Is he affected when thinking about killing his mother? It's very possible. I'm not saying that they definitely aren't. You don't see any actual tears roll down, but he could be holding them back. But I do think that he is feeling joy when he talks about this.
"No." I said, "Good night." And I knew I was going to kill her.
And there he is covering his mouth. Now, watch this right here. Now, it's not unusual that we cover our mouths if we're crying or when we're trying to stifle something. But I do wonder if he knows that he's smiling, if he is putting on a performance, because he is in absolute control of the narrative. He wants to fool people. He loves to do this. That is evidenced throughout this interview. He seems to feel joy and exuberance when he talks about fooling people. When he talks about the murders, he also smiles. This is someone who has the capacity to feel very deeply. And so I think right now he might be covering his mouth because even if it's unconsciously, he has a certain way that he wants to come across. I don't think this is shame over crying. I think it could be a way to stifle that smile.
And I knew I was going to kill her, you know. And I was so cold, it's so hard. And that's the first time in 10 years I've looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly.
And he wants you to know how honest this is. Watch this.
Looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly.
So he's raising his eyebrows when he's saying that honestly. That doesn't mean that what he's saying is more true, but that's what he wants you to pay attention to. He wants you to focus on the fact that he's being honest, or so he says.
It hurts. Because I'm not.
See, he said it hurts, and then he starts smiling. Once again, this is someone who is fooling you right now. This is someone who has a performance that he's putting on, and he is just loving it.
A lizard. I'm not from under a rock. I came out.
I'm going to go ahead and stop this part right here because he does go on to talk about what he ultimately did after he murdered his mother. And I don't think anybody really should have to listen to this just so that you can learn more about Ed Kemper. But just understand, the body language stays the same, and it gets very, very disturbing. There's a lot more footage of Ed Kemper that we can go over later on. I'll probably do more videos about him because he does talk in a lot of detail about what goes on in his head. Even if some of it's lies, even if some of it's manipulative, there's still a lot that we can learn by watching his body language. Hopefully, one thing that you've gotten from this is someone you cannot trust, even if he turned himself in, even if he tells you details about what he did, even if he acknowledges how awful the things that he has done. And even if he says he wants to prevent other people from doing it, that doesn't mean that you can trust him. He is the very definition of a wolf in sheep's clothing. So you have to be very, very careful to even allow yourself to trust what he's saying through an interview. I think he gets great joy from these interviews because he's in control of what he's saying. And you've always got to keep that in mind with every single one of these serial killers. Control is so important. He is unique in the sense that he turned himself in twice, once after killing his grandparents, once after killing his mother. And so it's not that there isn't something there that's a little bit different than some of the other serial killers out there. But the things that he did were so beyond heinous, so indescribable. I didn't even talk about some of them on this video because it's just too much. So you really have to understand the kind of monster we're dealing with when it comes to someone like Ed Kemper. And he truly has a duality about him that is confusing, and it's hard to make sense of as you watch him talk. So hopefully this video has been interesting to you. I do plan on continuing to do more Flashback Forensics. It's a series that I greatly enjoy. I also plan to do more Contrasting Chaos. Please let me know who you'd like me to contrast Ed Kemper with, because I think that he could be very interesting to juxtapose with somebody else with a similar history or someone else with similar behaviors. Last thing before we finish up, I just want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.